Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Global Great Awakenings on globalfreedomtv.com. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. We are going to be joined by the great Mike Harris one more time to be looking at a lot of the issues that are coming up upon us. Mike, it's great to have you. Just before the show, we were talking a little bit about a few things that are arising, and you talked about the new security threat and a variety of things that are happening in Ukraine and elsewhere. I'm going to hand it right to you. What is the first thing that you wanted to open with regards to the new security threat that they're trying to introduce? And I think your theory of they're doing this as a response to the enormous success of the Tucker Carlson Putin interview is quite informative. But I'll let you elaborate, Mike Harris.
Well, LT, thank you for having me on one more time. It is truly an honor and a privilege. And thank you to the listeners who take your time to tune in to us. We wouldn't do this without you guys. In fact, we do it for you guys. And so I got to thank you guys each and every opportunity I get that you tune in. But yeah, you're correct. It hasn't been a week since Tucker Carlson released his profound interview with Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation.
Mm-hmm.
Putin came off as truly as a very intellectual, very calm, very deliberate,
Mm-hmm.
serious man with great gravitas.
Mm-hmm.
And that rattled the narrative within the Zionist controlled US military industrial establishment. It rattled them to the core because they're the narrative they want to project is that Putin is a madman, he's a maniac, he's out of control, all this, and Putin defeated that 110%.
Yeah.
That this is a rational, calm, collected human being who's very deliberate in his actions. He Nothing gets past this guy, but they want to preserve their narrative. So what do? Less than a week later, some clown in Congress wants to release the new security threat against the United States, and that is orbital satellite nukes and orbital satellite killers that can take out the U.S. communications grid, that can drop nukes on us from above, and all this. Well, let me tell you something, folks. Being I can't say I know everything about Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, what we call the Star Wars program, but I know a lot more than most people. Okay. Everything that they're talking about that is new to a new security threat from Russia has been around, has been conceptualized, and they've had working prototypes since the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
This is not news. This is old stuff,
I
old,
remember
old,
this
old
way back
stuff.
in 1984, 85. I remember it. I did an English debate on it when I was a freshman in high
And
school.
I want to point out something. My very dear friend, Carol Rosin, Carol, this is a shout out to you. But there is in place today, China and Russia have already signed it, and about 140 other countries have signed it. But it is a treaty to prevent the weaponization of outer space. You know who hasn't signed it? The United States refuses to sign it. And so this is a red herring. This is to keep the fear going within the population of the United States. Those who only watch the mainstream media, the Fox News, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, all the propaganda arms of the U.S. government. And I can't say U.S. government, of the U.S. oligarchy that controls our government. It's their propaganda arm. And so, Carol, I'm giving you a shout out here for a reason. That is because you have been the sole voice of reason on the U.S. side for decades, at least 25 years, trying to get this treaty approved by the United States and ratified by the U.S. Senate. And so there are efforts that have been made. Like I said, Russia signed it, China signed it, 140 other countries have signed it. The United States is dragging their feet and has not signed this. And so it's time to put some pressure on our own government to get on board and sign this treaty. Because if it is a security threat that they're claiming, then the U.S. should be eager to sign this treaty. But yet they hesitate. So we're
Well,
not
I think
we're
let
dealing
me
with
add to
liars.
that. Let me add to that, Mike, real quick, if I may. Just I'm not going to get into the technical aspects. You're the expert in that, but I'll just say from a psyop point of view, when I look at what's happening in the Congress, my intuitive sense tells me they are they are preparing, or they are right now mobilizing themselves in everything that they're doing to be like the high priests in the movie 300, stuck atop a mountain, these diseased old mystics who don't go anywhere. This is what Washington's becoming, a community of diseased old mystics and bureaucrats and deep state parasitic contractors, and the military, Sodom and Gomorrah and the Pentagon. They have now devolved and become so rotten with immorality, so rotten with wokeism, so rotten with political correctness. Like Millie said, I want to know what white rage is, instead of saying there is no white rage. As a military man and as a man with authority, I'll tell you there is no white rage or black rage or anything else. There's human beings, and some are good, some are smart, and some are dumb, and some are violent. But instead, they are using this religion of soft wokeism to justify all of these things that they're doing, and they're like rats. They're just packing themselves into this environment, and trying to set off as many fires as they can around America and the world to keep themselves in this illuminated ivory tower philosopher king, top of the pyramid position. And when they do that, that tells me Washington's dead. Washington is now a leprous cancer, a gangrene appendage, a appendix, if you will, an inflamed, poisonous appendix that's about to burst with madness and poison. So it needs to be completely tied off and removed from the body politic. This is the transition we're going into, because there's no redeeming qualities to these people anymore.
Well, Scott,
Even Rand Paul, I'll finish it by saying, gets up there and with an old sort of Huckleberry Finn cartoonish, well, here they come again. They're going to bring pallets of money over to you, instead of what Putin would say, or any intellectual would say, or even Tucker Carlson if they had the floor, which would be, ladies and gentlemen, this is the death of our republic. These are acts of treason. These are acts of war crimes. And these people that are pushing it, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer and the rest of them, are pushing us towards war. And quite frankly, they should be impeached and executed for treason. No one is putting the air brakes on this train that's gone off the cliff. That the newest toot that they're blowing out of their chimney stack is this little satellite Russian Star Wars reinvention. But I just want to say they seem to be psychologically isolating themselves on purpose.
well, Scott, you just made a very elegant and eloquent justification for why we need to purge our government, why we need new management at every level, because it has devolved to where corruption is the rule of the day. And what our lesson from this is, if you read the preamble of the Constitution, which says we are here to create a more perfect union, and it doesn't say that that creation and perfection stops. It just says that that's what we're here to do. Well, with this corruption, we've learned where the soft spots are in our current form of government. We've learned that concentrating too much power for too long in too few hands results in corruption. And so we need to re-engineer our Constitution so that we have better checks and better balances, that this will never happen to us again. We do have probably the most balanced form of government that's ever come around, but it's not a perfect form of government, and it has been corrupted. And so it is incumbent upon us, the American people, to manifest the change that we need to prevent this from ever happening again. And so that's my little pitch on that. But guys like Mitch McConnell, I mean, his wife, Miss Chow, is the family that owns the largest Chinese shipping lines that brings cargo from China to here. He's not going to do anything that's going to impede trade with China. Chuck Schumer, he's the senator from Tel Aviv. He doesn't care about America. He cares about Israel. So we've got these senators, and it seems to me like the Senate is more corrupt, and crooked than the House is,
Yes. Yes.
because there's fewer of them. So it's easier for the gangster class to target one and set them up. I mean, you look at the old movie The Godfather, where they set that senator up in Las Vegas, where he's sleeping with this hooker, and they drug him, and he wakes up, and she's dead. Well, they convinced him that he did it, and well, even if you didn't do it, we're going to make everybody think you did. So we own you now.
Yeah.
And so that is the vulnerability with our Republican form of government here, is that these people can be corrupted, whether it's through bribery, like Joe Biden, whether it's through blackmail, like many others that I'm sure are. But we need to fix this so that no one in there who is corrupt can last very long, whether it's term limits or some other mechanism. And we need another enforcement body out there, and their entire job, and that we need to keep these people secret so that nobody knows who they are. But their entire job is to monitor our elected officials for unseemly behavior.
Yes.
And look at them. And if they are corrupted, if like in The Godfather, the senator wakes up in bed with a dead hooker that the mob killed to set him up, they know about it, and they'll get him off the hook or force him to resign. That like the Bidens are going to watch all the financial transactions that the family's making in order to make sure that they can't be bought and bribed. We need to have these checks and balances over our elected officials, because regular old law enforcement ain't getting it done. So we've got to we've got to up our game. And if you want to be in government, you can be there for maybe 8, 10, 12 years, but that's it. And if you step out of line, if you sacrifice yourself, your integrity for something like that, you have to be held accountable. But like the drug cartels say, they say we can give you silver or we can give you lead. Plata y pluma. And so we have to have men and women, if they're going to serve as an elected official at any level of government, we expect our active duty military, particularly in the combat MOSs, the 11 Bravos, the infantry guys. We expect them to go into a hail of bullets, gunfire, whether they like it or not. They're going to go, they're going to charge, they're going to do what they have to do. We need to have that kind of courage out of our elected officials. We're going to say, to the cartels, yuck foo, I'll take the lead if you think you're a big enough man to give it to me, because I'm protected by my own people here, and we're going to take you out. Mm-hmm. And so we need to get more aggressive with our law enforcement in this country. This has been the trouble our government is in right now is two failures. One is intelligence, because we've had internal enemies. Termites have been in the United States, burrowing out the structure that we have here. And the other is in law enforcement, that we don't obey the laws. We don't enforce the laws vigorously enough. This last week, where this guy the special prosecutor assigned to Biden, says, well, he's too old and feeble to be prosecuted. That's really handy. But how can he be so old and feeble and yet run the country? Why isn't
Yes,
the 25th
exactly.
Amendment being? And so
Exactly.
we've got these problems here, and law enforcement in this country needs to take a new approach.
Think about
Let,
that for a second, though, Mike, and
okay,
finish your thought.
but I want to come back to this. So
Yeah,
it'll remind me to come back.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, I just wanted to take a moment to meditate on that, because you said something so profound. It defies a whole show by itself. But in the quickness of it, he is too old to prosecute, old and feeble, an old man with good intentions, with a bad memory. Yet he is alleged and positioned to be the commander in chief of the United States Armed Forces, to be the president of the United States. That is questionable, if not, of course, dubious and false in his constitutional election. He is the product of a fake, false, fraudulent, manipulated election vote tallying and a corrupt Congress that rushed him through under the cover of a psychological operation manifesting in mercenaries from Ukraine and elsewhere and other troublemakers and other FBI informants and intelligence agents in the January 6th operation. So he's a fraudulent fake president, but worse, he's a senile old fool, and he's a child molester with sexual addictions, and yet you are leaving him in you claim the United States of America is the most powerful nation on earth. You have this feeble old man in the presidency of the most powerful nation on earth, the United States of America. This is what the Congress is confronted with. This is what the House and the Senate are confronted with, and everyone. I mean, the vice president is just a bunch of an idiot. She's not even qualified to be president, of course. But where are the men and women in Congress standing up demanding the impeachment of Joe Biden, not just because of the classified documents, not because of just shell game, not because of sexual immorality, not just because of his corrupt relationship with Ukraine and his son's operations there and the massive money laundering and bribery that was going on, all of these things, and the use of that is a convenient witch hunt for Donald Trump because he was rattling the cage. He was asking questions about this Ukrainian Zelensky Biden, Hunter Biden relationship, but both back at the election when the FBI was covering it up and the FBI was communicating to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, stop all of these broadcasts because they're Russian information when they weren't. And the Indian CEO of YouTube, well, we must take down all speech that's not nice. That's the biggest front. That son of a bitch ought to be beaten within an inch of his life, if not past it, after due process of a public court. But how can someone like that? How can the Congress have any respect? The government have any respect when a prosecutor says he's too old to prosecute, yet the United States government leaves someone in that condition to be president, especially
Scott,
given the turmoil that we're facing.
well, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth, and that is how can he be too old to prosecute if he's effective enough to cheat his way into the White House? You know, I mean, he's obviously a very devious son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm not buying the fact that he's too old to prosecute. I think that's just a get out of jail free card for him.
Right. I agree.
And you know, it's a very small fig leaf that he's hiding behind there.
And justice is supposed to be blind. Justice is supposed to be blind. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, a Protestant, a Catholic, a black, well, a white, a woman, an 80-year-old, or a 18-year-old.
Rephrase the question, Scott. Rephrase the question. If he's at his age, if he's driving his Corvette down the street drunk and he hits a child and kills it, is he going to be booked for manslaughter? Or is he going to be let go because he's too old and feeble to he's done more harm to this country than merely killing a child for manslaughter.
Yeah.
He's done much more harm. And so you know, how would he be treated under those circumstances? I think he'd do some time in lockup.
Yeah.
For if he did the manslaughter issue. Or let's say some equivalent 81, 82-year-old man did it. They'd spend time in jail. And Joe Biden is not too old to prosecute, and he should be prosecuted. But by the same token, this kind of guts him, and it really makes for if you're trying to win the hearts and minds of the electorate, Hur was appointed by Trump, and he cut the balls off Joe Biden. It makes a great TV commercial for the upcoming campaign season.
Yeah.
So there's a multitude of facets going on here. I don't know what's planned or who did it, but there's multiple facets to this issue. And but my personal opinion is that Biden should be prosecuted for his crimes.
Of course.
Regardless of his age, because if he or any other 81, 82-year-old guy was driving a car and hit a kid, manslaughter, he's going to prison on that.
Yeah. And
so, you know, Biden's done more harm. So ergo. Mm-hmm. But getting back to law enforcement in this country. You look at how the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, how they've all built their empires, and none of them, they'll go out and bust a guy. He'll have, you know, some 8 balls of Coke or some grams of Coke, whatever it comes in these days. I don't know. And they'll say, look, we'll give you a deal if you give us the next guy up you're getting it from. And they play this game where they work up the food chain. But the problem is that they never get the ultimate decision maker, and the drug problem has gotten worse and worse. So why are we going to continue to have law enforcement the way they've been doing it? If you bust a guy on the street with drugs, bust him, throw the book at him, get him a maximum sentence. And if you do that to enough guys on the street, the distributor levels, the wholesale levels, are going to go out of business because they can't keep their retailers of the drugs open. And so you're going to stop the drug problem that way. It goes back to the broken glass, the broken window technique of law enforcement that Rudy Giuliani did so effectively in New York City to clean it up. And we need to do that nationwide because the cartels are operating in every major any city over 30,000 people right now. The cartels have a presence,
See,
and we can't tolerate this any longer. We've got to come down on them and end what's going on. But I digress. Let's go back to Ukraine.
yeah, and let me just finish on that one point. To me, and I may be wrong, but my instincts are usually right on. The police, and I've seen them up close and personal. The FBI, all of these groups. There are a lot of good ones, but there are those who see their identity and their purpose and their mission and their organization all as one, and they progress by bullying, by intimidation, by threats, by, well, I got a gun and a badge and you don't. They don't say those words, but that's always implicit. And the coming disruptions, the current invasion, which will inevitably lead to greater disruptions and greater abuses in a whole uh, escape from New York sort of scenario all across America. They're going the illegal immigrants are going to engage in these sort of practices in black markets and kidnapping and trafficking, and I mean these are many regards subhuman species. But yet the FBI, the law enforcement, the police, they are hobbled or restricted or crippled or just mentally lobotomized from seeing the American civilian, the American veteran, the American republic, the American man public, should we say, the real males. These law enforcement agencies and personnel, I think, Mike, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think they view the alpha males, the military veterans, the civilians now that have re-entered their community after service or whatever. I think the police look at them with a disdain, with a jealousy, with a competitiveness, with a sense of shame because many of them never served in the military. They're not that educated. They're, if anything, they're only educated in their processes, protocols, systems of law enforcement. They also have a lot of psychological traumas and disruptions, a lot of issues, and what concerns me is that as the heat grows, they're going to turn against and look for opportunities to prosecute, to harm, to arrest, to handcuff, to corral or try and manage these white population alpha males rather than seeing them as a natural ally and as a natural security buttress to their mission. I just see a competitiveness coming up, and if
No,
that happens, you're going to have a real, I mean, violence. You're going to have the police against the white people, and the third worlders coming up wreaking havoc, who are beating up cops in New York. And it just seems like we're being pushed into the scenario where they're all going to be at each other's throats. And I don't want it to be that way, but the police are the ones that have to give up their assumption of being able to abuse anyone at any time. They have to give that up if they're going to survive what's coming, I think. But I'll end it. I'll give it back to you to end before we transition to Ukraine. Go ahead.
well, I don't know about that. I'm just hesitant to comment. but the FBI has identified white nationalists as domestic terrorists, and that is bullshit.
Yeah.
We're the ones who built this country.
Yeah.
Our forefathers. My family here has lived in this country for over 8 generations. Okay, we're not some new immigrant that whose dad came over. We're the first born in this country. Our parents weren't born in this country. I mean, I go back 8 generations, maybe further, but I've got the records in hand for 8 generations I can document. Okay, so that's a substantial amount of time. It's 200 years, and so I know that where my people come from. I know what they did, how they lived, what they had to do to get here. And we're the ones who built this country. We're the ones who are going to protect this country. If you go back and you look at old law enforcement back, 100, 150 years ago, uh, they didn't have the sheriff or the marshal didn't have a huge staff of hundreds of people. He had two or three, and he would deputize people around him to form the posse to go get the bad guys who robbed the Glendale train. So we're the ones who built it. We're the ones who've always been here to buttress this country and to buttress and reinforce law enforcement. And law enforcement better figure out who brung them to the dance.
Mm.
It wasn't the blacks, it wasn't the browns, it wasn't the illegal aliens.
Mhm.
It was white Americans. And as soon as they forget that, they're in trouble. Now, I look at major police departments coast to coast. Look at the Kansas City shooting a day or two ago. A female in Kansas City, a white female, not a black female. If you look at the city of St. Louis, it's a black female. Look at Chicago, black female. Look at New York, a black female. Look at Atlanta, black female. These are who your police chiefs are these days. And it's not the white American male who is in these positions of authority any longer. This has been by design. And as you and I have discussed, women can't do it. They don't have the disposition to do it. They don't have the authority within their heart and soul to do it. They can try. They're good administrators. They're good at that. But as far as being a police chief to set the tone and timbre of what your department is going to be like, they don't have it. And then you look at the black white question. I mean, how many of these black police chiefs really are there on their own merit and not from some DEI affirmative action to virtue signal to the rest of the country that they're open minded and that they're going to have a different approach to law enforcement because white men are too brutal. Well, they're only brutal if you break the law, only brutal if you commit the crime and you resist arrest. That's when cops get really tough. They don't like it. So that's a lot of that happens. Where does it happen the most? In the black communities. Why does it happen there the most? Because they commit the most crimes. I mean, if you read 50% of the murders are committed by 6% of the population, and that's black men. And so it's disproportionate there. So these things are issues that we have to reevaluate because what we're doing now doesn't work. If it worked, crime would be dropping, not rising.
Yeah.
If it worked, the drug problem would be going away, it wouldn't be growing. And so what we're doing doesn't work. What the cartels and the criminals are doing works very well because they're being successful. The law enforcement effort is failing. So
Well,
that's my piece.
it's interesting. We've sown the seeds by destroying the black family in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s with welfare reform, no fault divorce, putting unmarried males into the household, disintegrating the role of the father, has disintegrated the moral core of
Absolutely.
black male. And Moynihan wrote about this, the death of the Negro family, and all sorts of others. It's completely
No.
self-inflicted, and it's
And,
been done most likely by Jewish, Zionist, Ashkenazi agendas. Let's take apart the blacks, turn them into rabid dogs, and they're just then unleash them through whatever protocols of Zion Justice Department. We're not going to prosecute blacks or put them in jail without bail. We're going to let them run
well,
rampant.
well, Scott,
Uh,
let me interject here because you look at the education system in the black inner city. It's not there to educate; it's there to babysit.
wow.
They babysit and they indoctrinate and they tell them how unfair they've been. They lower the standards and lower the standards and lower the standards. I've told the story about this guy that I worked with at one time. His name was Ted, great guy, heavy, fat black guy. He graduated from Chaparral High School at Scottsdale, Arizona, a good white neighborhood, white school. And the guy couldn't read or write. He could read a comic book. It was his level of reading. And but he graduated. Why did he graduate? Because nobody wanted to fail him because he was, one of the few black kids in the school. So nobody wanted to fail him, and the teacher would be called a racist. Number one, and number two, the teacher didn't want to teach him again next year. They
No,
wanted to push him
no,
on, shove him through,
I
get him through
understand.
there.
I would be too. I mean, to be honest.
And so, but then you multiply that with these all black schools and stuff. They're a babysitting service that they use to indoctrinate them about how unfairly they've been treated.
And let
And
me,
how
yeah, and we'll move on to Ukraine, but let me just say that's the other problem, Mike, with this mass influx of migrants, illegal immigrants into this country. You are now going to force school kids, white school kids in white areas who are, have decent classes, public school classes, now to be filled with minorities who can't speak English and who bring natural disruption in with them. And there's hostility and an animosity ingrained in them. There's already a racism in La Raza, the Hispanic MS-13 oriented, group that is white collar now in California. The La Raza groups trying to, slowly boil the frog and take over much parts of the United States. Again, the solution has to be the breaking up of the United States into the United Republics, and every republic is responsible for its own integrity of the border and writing their own laws. If you're in here and you're not a legal resident or a citizen of the United States, United Republics, you're gone. You're put into a work camp for 3 months, and then you're gone, or 6 months, and then you're gone. There needs to be a zero tolerance for anyone bringing in here. I don't want to go too far down, but
well, Scott, I just want to remind people of the news item we saw this past week where a 15-year-old Venezuelan illegal alien shot a security guard.
Yeah.
Where did he get the goddamn gun?
Yeah.
I mean, where is this coming from? Where is a 15-year-old kid who is on the public dole that we're paying for? Where is he getting a firearm that he can shoot a security guard who's trying to do his job? Like I said, this is a you talk about we talk about Islam for 20 years, the clash of cultures since 9/11. This is the real clash of culture. You're going to see the savages against the civilized.
Yeah.
And our blacks in this country are already freaking out about how resources that they thought were theirs are being diverted to these illegal aliens. Now it's just starting to get sporty out there. It's going to get a lot sportier here
It
real
is.
quick.
It is.
But
Now, go to Ukraine. You were making some fascinating comments on the transition and the appearance of changing the musical chairs of Zelensky and Syrskyi and Zaluzhny, and we've just seen they're pulling out of Avdiivka. Give us some of your analysis of that, Mike. Go ahead.
well, Zelensky had to retire the previous general Saluzny. Had to get rid of him because Saluzny had the loyalty of the military, and the military realizes that they're being treated as a disposable commodity.
Yeah.
They are now conscripting 17 to 25-year-old women, and they're being, showing up, and they're being wounded, they're being killed. Okay, so the military is about to say no more, and Zelensky was going to. I can't say this, but I'm going to speculate that he was going to be the victim of a coup,
Yeah.
and then they were going to sue for peace. So Victoria Nuland and all of her sycophants leaned on Zelensky to get rid of this guy and bring in Syrskyi. Now, Syrskyi is a Russian citizen, Russian born, but he's an old Soviet style commander, and he is going to, you thought it was a meat grinder before, it's going to be a real meat grinder now. Now, the bigger picture on this is that the Jews want Khazaria back, and Ukraine is the heart of Khazaria. They want it back. And the more of the white, Christian, Slavic people that they can kill off in this war, have Russia kill them for them,
Yeah.
the easier it's going to be for when Israel collapses to move their Jewish population into Ukraine. There's going to be vacancies. Let's just say that they've already lost 500,000 men there. 25 million people fled the country and left either to Russia and or to Western Europe.
Yeah.
And so there is vacancy for them now. So the Jews want to clean it up. They want it as their domain back.
But they have
Uh,
to ask permission of Russia to get back in there, don't they? Because Russia is going to control it all, and if Russia's
well,
smart, they
I
won't
hope
let them.
so. I'm really hoping that Putin gets a little more assertive here with Ukraine, and that he stops the slow, methodical march. I hope he does an end around and takes Lviv, which is in the western part of Ukraine, near the Polish border, which is where all NATO operations are out of. Uh, Putin has not yet reacted to the 70 or the 60 French soldiers who were killed in Ukraine yet. And that was an act of aggression by France, a NATO country, against Russia. And so we're waiting for some things to develop. I mean, I am so impressed with Putin, how methodical, how deliberate, how he plays his game without emotion, that he doesn't let himself get upset or angry. He stays focused on his goal and he keeps going towards the goal. He's got a plan and he's implementing the plan. I just hope he expands it. I hope he can do an end around, maybe come down through the north through Belarus and cut off, surrounded. But people need to remember, and Putin made a great case of this, and that is that this has been Russian land and territory with Russian people for 1,000 years. And people need to remember, before the Mongol invasion of Genghis Khan, Kiev was the capital of the Rus, of Russia.
Mhm.
And so, you're going to give that up? Never. That would be like giving up Philadelphia, because that used to be the capital of the United States before we moved it to
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
D.C.
Yeah.
And so that's as good of an analogy as I can give on that. But could you imagine the United States ceding, Philadelphia? If I can't see it. I
Well,
mean, that's where the concept.
do you think this is a U.S. Israel conspiracy to a plan to move the Jews, the Khazarians, the Ashkenazis back into that area of Ukraine? That the United States, the Schumers and the Zionist lobby groups, AIPAC, and all of that are actively pushing that. That's why they're so adamant to continue funding and keep this up, because if that's the case, you've got Netanyahu and the U.S. involved trying to push this, but it seems like they're throwing all of this money into a fire that's eventually just going to continue, just peter out. It's not going to burn for very much longer because Ukraine doesn't have any money, doesn't have any men, doesn't have the men and the
Well,
weapons.
Scott, you got a fire that's dying down. You dump a cup of gasoline on it, poof, it goes way big again.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
all the 60 billion is going to do. It's going to be like dumping gasoline on a fire. It'll burn hot for 30 seconds. It's gone.
that's right.
And that's what this is going to be. But it is my opinion, and my opinion only. I want to be clear about this, that yes, Victoria Nuland was tasked with that job of starting this mess in
Yeah,
order to liberate Ukraine and get it back into Khazaria. Schumer knows about it. The Jew oligarchs who run our country know about it, and they're going to be wiped out in Israel. They will not be able to stay there, and they're going to be crying that they're the victims again. That these Muslim hordes, these savage Muslims, are going to come kill us all. We've got to get out. Please give us safe passage to our homeland of Khazaria, which is now Ukraine. That's the pitch. I see it coming.
yes.
I mean, but this is, like I said, my opinion alone. I don't have any documents. I've not had any briefings about what this what they're planning. I don't get invited to the United Council of Rabbis. They, they, they don't send me my engraved invitation every
I
year.
don't
But
see you with the little curly dreadlocks or whatever those are, or the big funky
it's
black hats.
the Chabad rabbis don't invite me to their meetings. But this is what I suspect is happening. And anybody who takes a 60,000-foot view and understands how these people work, how they operate, can see this is that they have a grander plan here.
But
Um, you know,
but it doesn't seem, Mike. Again, Doesn't seem like that's going to happen because the world is so nauseated and horrified by the Palestinian genocide that Israel is orchestrating. There's no going back from that. There's no forgetting that. There's no denial of the pancaked freeway-looking towns of concrete rubble with red stains all over them from the people that have been squashed and smashed, and the children and who are now amputees, and those images, those the fruits of that policy of Israel just murdering everyone, shooting at women, shooting at ambulance drivers, luring them in to rescue children who are stuck in cars under concrete. The Israelis luring in ambulances. Yeah, you can come in this route, pick them up, and then shoot and kill the ambulance people. There's no going back from that. And you know,
Well,
this doesn't seem like the Khazarian plan is going to peter out unless Putin totally sells his soul to them, or Medvedev does. But I don't think that's going to happen because the Russian people know the Israelis had what 2,000 Mossad Shin Bet operatives in Ukraine teaching the Ukrainians how to waterboard and do organ harvesting, you know, child sex trafficking. All of that was done in Ukraine by Israel, and then their personnel went back for this most recent genocide. But that seems to be a spoiler in that whole plan.
well, Scott, let me toss a reminder out there. It was the same people who are doing the same. This we're dealing with the grandsons and granddaughters of the ones who did the Bolshevik Revolution. And the Bolsheviks, through the time of communism until the Berlin Wall fell, murdered between 80 and 100 million Russian Christian men, women, and children. And it's hard to hear much about it. It's been swept under the rug, but we hear constantly about the Jewish Holocaust. So World War II was a masking event to hide the crimes of the Bolshevik Jews, what they did to the Russians. And then they created the illusion of the Holocaust in order to take your attention away from what the Jews themselves had done to the Russians.
Yes.
So it worked that time. Now, they only have so many plays in their playbook.
Yes.
So I suspect that they will attempt to have another world war, and they will attempt to have some other masking event to take your attention off of their crimes against the Palestinians and against the Ukrainians in order to say, well, we're the victims here. See, the Jew is the guy who will punch you in the face and then complain that you hurt his hand. He's the victim here because you hurt his hand, your face is so hard, you know? So that's how they work. They do tremendous criminal activity, tremendous crimes against humanity. And yet they always have a way out and they always have a patsy to blame for it. In this case, they blame the German people for being horrible for the Holocaust when they were the ones who murdered 10 times that amount in the Holocaust that took place in Russia. You don't hear about the Holodomor. You know, I didn't learn about the Holodomor until I was invited to my translator Ina's house and
Yeah.
met her grandmother, and she explained to me what happened and told me that they starved 15 million people in Ukraine, that they resulted in cannibalism to have to survive, and that's harsh, that's severe, because they couldn't admit communism doesn't work because their central planning for what the agricultural production was going to be resulted in massive starvation in Russia. So they went and stole all the grain out of Ukraine to feed the people because it doesn't work. And this is what they are. This is how they do it. And so we've got to be very vigilant that we don't have a third world war, that they can't use it to mask the crimes they're committing today
Yeah.
in Palestine and in Ukraine, and that we hold these people who are committing the crimes accountable finally, because they've been managing to get off time after time
Yes.
after time.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
it's going to be interesting to see too what happens in the United States with regards to Israel and Ukraine, and you know, the pulling back that seems to be happening. Russia could end this very quickly, of course. Russia could take out Zelensky and take out Syrskyi, and then you'd have Zaluzhny naturally step in. I've said they're probably going to put a woman in to replace Zelensky so she can be a Joan of Arc, stand in front of the Russian tank in a Tiananmen Square moment, and the Western media will, herald that person as the deliverer of Ukraine, there's a lot of weird things that are going to be happening out of desperation and delusion, desperation and delusion. The delusion that Ukraine ever had a chance of fighting is absolutely hysterical, unless
Yes.
you look at this plan that you just put forth. That seems like their agenda was to destroy every Christian Ukrainian Orthodox natural born person.
Scott, remember, according to Solzhenitsyn, the Bolsheviks killed 80,000 Russian Orthodox priests in a week in order
Wow.
to wipe out the to purge religion from them. I mean, think about these things. But back to Syrski. I think Syrski himself is going to have to face a mutinous armed forces because the people lost or the active duty lost confidence in Zaluzny, and so Zelensky was getting scared because Zaluzny was going to have to do something to keep his job and to keep the armed forces intact. So Zelensky pulled the plug on him. Now he's got Syrski in there. Syrski is even more of a butcher,
Yes, they've
and
called him that.
that's what his nickname is, the
Yeah,
Butcher.
yeah.
And so, how many colonels out there are going to actually obey him and listen to them when their lives are on the line and their troops are on the line? Are they
And
really
see,
going to follow his orders, or are they going to relieve him of his command from the bottom up? And then Zelensky's gone anyway. He'll
yeah,
get purged. He'll get mutinied out of there. They'll coup him out.
it seems like this is the last moments where the sands in the hourglass appear to be, in a quickening drop, right? It's slow, but then as the last sands are almost there, it seems to quicken. This seems to be a quickening of the end of Ukraine. But Russia's information war, Russia's communications would seem to be in need of being quickened too, to say, this Syrski commander by Ukraine, by Zelensky, is just meant to annihilate all of you. Lay down your weapons and come to the Russian side, or surrender, or go to Belarus or something, or get out, because he's going to kill all of you unless you stand up and save Ukraine by removing Zelensky and Syrski yourself. Do you see a internal wave coming that either the Russians, help inspire, or is going to be naturally inspired by the Ukrainians going, we're
I
done
think it's
with
going
it?
to be naturally inspired by the Ukrainian rank and file within the military.
Do you think it'll happen that way?
Yes,
The rank and file
yes,
Ukrainians will
yes.
rise up?
Either they will mutiny and throw out Syrski and Zelensky, or they will defect and go over to Russia
Yeah.
because they know they're going to die if they keep doing what they're doing. Nobody wants to die. They, like I said, 500,000 men already, and how many hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children as collateral damage to this war has happened. I mean, when you were there, you saw women living in basements and had that, and they're just barely getting by, hanging on. And so, how much longer can this go on? And the answer is not much longer. But the Jewish oligarchs who run Ukraine don't care. They want them all gone anyway. They want them all dead. They want them ethically cleansed off of what used to be called Khazaria over 1,000 years ago. So
What do you think needs to happen in the Ukrainian area? The Donbass, Donetsk, Lugansk, Crimea is one thing. Those are republics now in the orbit of Russia. But the rest of Ukraine, how do you see the best plan for the next 5 years
well,
redeveloping and growing
what
Ukraine?
what I would do if I was Putin, I would go all the way to the Polish border.
Mhm.
And then I would negotiate from a position of strength as to how much territory you're going to give back
Mhm.
and what security guarantees can you give. I mean, um, when James Baker promised Gorbachev that we won't go an inch further, the U.S. has always said, well, where's the paper? We have nothing in writing, just a verbal promise. If we're not good for our word,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter if you write it down or not.
that's right.
And we have the United States, because of our the Jewish interference in this. And like, remember when this first happened? I told you, Scott, we don't have a dog in this fight.
Nope.
We
Nope.
don't have a dog in this fight.
Nope.
However, the Jewish oligarchs and the Jewish government that runs our country has a dog in the fight. It's
Yeah.
important to them, but
Yeah.
not to us. We, the American people, we don't care what happens. We want Putin to win so that this nonsense can stop,
Yeah.
and these Jews can be put back in their place. And so we want Putin to win. I'm rooting for the Russian side. I want the Ukrainians to defect and join the Russian army and help clean up their own country.
Yeah.
I want
That's
them
the
to. I don't want to see. I mean, I've been to Ukraine. I mean, I don't want to see a single one of these young Ukrainian women get killed, whether they've been conscripted in the service or whether it's by collateral damage, hit the apartment building they lived in. I don't want to see it happen to any of them.
Yeah. And see,
I,
the Russians do not have an animosity or a blood vengeance or vendetta or hatred or any kind of hysterical fury at the Ukrainians for everything that's happened. The Russians don't have that. The Russian commanders don't have that. The Russian volunteers and the military, they do not have that. Neither do the people in Russia. I
I mean,
saw this, and that's important to understand is that the Russians are doing this with a great deal of sadness, but
that's
Russian
what I was just going
resolve.
to say. If I was a colonel, if serving in the Russian army, and I had to take my brigade out to go I would be so sad with what I have to do. But I've got a job. I've got to do it,
Yeah,
accomplish the mission.
yeah.
But it would be with a heavy heart. There would be no joy that I'm finally killing my blood enemy here. No, it's not that. I have to go kill my cousins.
Yes,
That
and
I would.
that's what they've said to me personally is, why what and they pointed, I remember being at a battalion talking with the commander, and I said, some of you and I are on the same sheet, and I was saying a lot of the same stuff you and I talk about. Here's what you need to do this, do this, do this, in diplomatic, humble ways. But he said, we number one, pointed to this gal that was a translator. He said, she's Ukrainian. I don't want to kill her. I don't want to kill any of Ukrainians. They're our people. They're Slavic. He didn't get into the delusion of the brainwashing, the MK Ultra that the CIA and everybody did to these people, but they said we don't want to fight and kill them. They're Russian. They keep saying they're Russian, and this attitude permeates all of Russia. But they've also said, why do we want Zelensky to go? The longer he's there, the better he makes us look, because the worse Ukraine is. But I would say that's sort of very short-sighted, because you're leaving a madman in charge of a military state that's now grabbing women off the street, grabbing young boys, grabbing old men, grabbing people off the street and actively murdering them, putting them in a military uniform first and maybe a gun that they don't even know how
And
to
then
fire.
sending to certain death. Yeah,
Yes, certain death.
that's what they're doing. So essentially, they may not be the one firing the bullet and pulling the trigger, but they're the ones who put them in the right place to get hit by the bullet.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
and their life, if they hadn't gotten picked up off the street, press gangs. That's what they used to call them in England. They had a
Yes.
press gang. They go out and pick up anybody, and they wake up on a ship, and they're in the British Navy now. And that's what they're doing in Ukraine today, because nobody supports Ukrainians. Don't support this war.
Yeah.
They didn't want this, and this is the Jewish manipulation of the events in Ukraine. We're supporting it because of the Jewish manipulation of the United States government. Any government or anybody who supports this war is bought and paid for by the Jewish interest. And we got to get out and say it. This is what the truth is. The United States, the people of the United States, we do not have a dog in this fight. Our lives are not going to be any better because of what's going on in Ukraine. In fact, they're going to be a lot worse, because we're borrowing the 60 billion that our grandkids are going to have to pay back in government borrowing. And so it's taking resources that we desperately need here at home. And our army is not protecting the continental U.S. They're not protecting the southern border. We're all over the Middle East. We're all over the world. 900 something bases. We have forgotten the fundamentals, and we need to reinvent our entire country in a way that makes sense and serves the American people,
Mhm.
because we pride ourselves in being a government of the people, for the people, by the people, but we're not. We're a government for the oligarchs, for the donor class, for the professional politicians. And we have lost our way as a country, and we as a people need to take it back.
Yeah. Mike
And
Harris,
elections don't work
wonderful to have,
because they steal the damn things.
always wonderful to have you on. We've got to go. We'll have you on next time. Thank you very much for joining us on globalfreedomtv.com and Global Great Awakenings. We will see you next time. God bless you. I'm going to be traveling, but when I return, we will have a lot of very exciting things to report. No one better to report them than with Mike Harris, who knows that country and people well.
Thanks, LT.
See you next time. Good night. God bless.